Welcome, everybody, to the fourth episode of Ancient Angels podcast. Today, we are going to be continuing with the theme subtly of Christmas, but not really. It's elves. We're going to be talking about the angels, elves, and Elohim. I got JT here with us. You excited to talk about angels, bro, and elves?
Always. Mm-hmm.
Throw in some J.R. Tolkien topic stuff here. Not completely. We do have to do a whole episode on J.R. Tolkien because honestly, there's so much for him that it's overwhelming. But what we are going to talk about is elves and dwarves. And did you know, JT, that dwarves and elves are mentioned in the Bible? Did you know that?
I did not. I didn't know that. No, I did not.
Okay, so did you know about dwarves being mentioned in the Bible?
No, I don't think so. I mean, if you told me, I forgot.
Okay, well, we're going to talk about dwarves first, and then we're going to talk about elves, and we're gonna talk about gingers too. By the way, so any redheads watching, keep watching. It might scare you a little, but it's not a big deal. You're fine. You're all covered under the blood. Again, I feel like we have to throw out a disclaimer before we talk about these topics because I think some people might watch some of this stuff and then be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm a Nephilim." Okay, but don't worry. We're gonna talk about Nephilim. We're gonna break it down. But first, I want to bring up a verse in Leviticus. Okay, Leviticus 21, and I got to break this down to give us our kickoff with starting about elves in the Bible. Okay, so in Leviticus 21:18. It starts, but God's basically laying out the type of people that are not allowed to come before the throne of God to offer their offerings to the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so it says here in this verse, and you have to, my suggestion would be look it up in Bible Hub. Okay. And so that way you can get a better concept of this. Maybe I can just share my window. Okay, so Leviticus 21:18. No man who has any defect may come near. No man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed. Okay. So I want you to notice, okay, blind or lame, disfigured or deformed, who has a mutilated face or a limb too long. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that a weird one? Okay. And then no man who is blind or lame, disfigured or deformed. Okay. He has a blemish. Okay. It says, or with a flat nose or any superfluous thing. A flat nose or anything superfluous. Isn't this getting a little bit weird when you start reading it, right? Okay. No is marred in face or any limb too long. Okay. No one who has a slit nose or any conspicuous feature. Isn't that getting weird? So no man, see, we read these things and we don't try to understand the actual word for this in Hebrew. Disfigured face, limb too long. Okay. Disfigured face, no man is blah blah blah, has a flat nose or anything superfluous, facial disfigured or deformed. So what do you think a flat nose or a slit nose might look like?
I mean,
what do you think?
No, I mean, I don't know. I'm not going to say because I don't want to sound racist.
Yeah, well, this is some of the racist ideas come from, right? But here's when you get to a slit nose, that's a weird one because that's not a flat nose, right?
Yeah, or a slit nose. That's really weird. I'm not even sure what that would be.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to give you flat nose or stretched out, who has a crooked nose or have little or a great. It says, okay, large, lame, who has a slit nose or a limb too long. And so here's where it gets really weird. Okay, so when you start looking into these different translations, I had to go, who is deprived of ears? Did you notice this one? Look at that one. No one whose nose is cut off or is deprived of ears. Or whose ear, look at this translation, whose ear is deformed. Isn't that one interesting? So you've got weird. Whose ear is cut. Isn't that weird? So whose ear is cut, ear is deformed. Why is it talking about ears looking weird? Isn't this kind of strange? The further down you go, the more translational things you go. I had to go to a Jewish rabbi to get the proper translation for this, by the way. I contacted the rabbi at the local synagogue here, and I went and had a talk with him. And I said, what is this word that says disfigured ear or ear too long or stretched ear? And I was like, what does this actually mean? And he explained to me the word. I forget the name of it right now, but he explained to me the word. He said it's an expression that they had in their Jewish culture, whatever, in ancient Hebrew. It was a word describing stretching skin over another shape to form that shape into another thing to look like something else. That was the word. And I said, "What is that even like? What does that like mean?" He's like, it's hard to describe, but he said it was like a practice for stretching skin over another form. So
Hmm.
I'm like, that's a really strange description, and that's the word they use. But it has something to do with ears, okay? An ear being cut, which is interesting because when you cut a plant, that means when you join it together, it's when you splice something, right? And so a signifying gesture of something that's being cut or spliced means when two things are joined in one. And so, and also that stretching thing was when one thing that has another shape of skin is stretched over another object to look like that object. That's the actual Hebrew word that was used in this thing. But it points to having a limb too long or an ear too long. What's that make you think of?
Pointy ears, maybe.
Pointy-eared elves, doesn't it? Doesn't that sound a little bit strange when we're talking about skin stretched over something that has a point too long or an ear too long or a limb too long or a cut ear or a deformed figured? And then when we talk about slit nose, what do you think a slit nose could look like?
Mm, I don't know. I don't know. I think a lot of this kind of sounds like with the cradle headboarding and like like the people the tribes would stretch their necks and like what you're saying. It's like they're trying to emulate something, right?
They're trying to emulate something for sure. So here's my theory for a slit nose. Let me give you my perspective. So what do you think a slit nose looks like when you see a bunny? And then you see this.
Oh, the cleft palates. Oh yeah.
Bro, what do you think that is? That is a remnant. That is a remnant left over of somebody that had slit nose at one point. This was like the people that had animal faced figurines, like they had animal DNA. The lip goes all the way up, just like it does on a bunny or on a cat or on
Mm.
any kind of animal, like because they were hybridized. That's what a slit nose is. And
Oh,
so, like, we see
that's
remnants.
interesting.
Yeah, that's what it's referring to. It's referring to the lion faced men of Moab, bro. It's referring to the people that had a slit in their nose because they had a flat nose because their mouth went all the way to the edge of their nose. It wasn't like what we see people today with flatter noses like this. It has to do with people's whose lips, their whole mouth protruded out and it made their nose seem flat because
Mm-hmm.
their nose, that's what it was referring to. It was referring to a totally different thing. And so that's what we're looking at. And so when we understand what this is referring to, it starts to like change your perspective a little bit because you realize, oh, a limb too long or a flat nose, it's talking about genetic anomalies. It's talking about hybridization of things.
Brian, look at what about this one though?
Show me, show me. Yes, exactly. That would be a flat nose, slit nose,
Oh.
pointy eared creature.
Oh wow.
That's
Yeah, I mean,
exactly what they were talking about.
well, it's interesting too. Just not to go too far off on a rabbit trail or a cat trail. What's interesting? There was a really interesting video I saw a while back, and it was talking about the cat's eyes are like basically domesticated cats. They're very similar features to like big cats. Like like you see how they walk, and we got a cat. You see how it moves and stuff like that. It looks like you can imagine if it was 100 times bigger, it would look like a tiger.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but what's really interesting is that the big cats do not have the same kind of pupils as the little
Mm.
cats. The little cats have the slit pupils like reptiles.
Dude, even geckos have slit pupils, some of them, and I think they look kind of creepy. So lizards
Mm-hmm.
don't even have slit pupils, I think. Some lizards, most of them, I don't think they do.
And then so you have the ancient Egyptians gave some reverence to the cats, and the cats had something to do with they were some kind of guardians of the underworld.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever seen that the movie The Mummy, like when the mummy is like basically regaining his human form, like before he's fully human, like the cat keeps scaring him off. It's really weird. It's almost like, yeah, like that. Do they have more of a perception of, the veil? They can see through the veil with those kind of eyes.
Hmm.
It's
They're
interesting to
made,
think about.
bro. Yeah, it's a strange thing, and goat's eyes are tripping out too. Crazy, weird looking.
Mm.
And so yeah, it's like it is an unusual eye thing too. Absolutely. Okay, so ready? Let's jump to the next verse because now we're gonna break down a few more things. And this is where we get into, so now I've given you a basis for what disfigured and deformed may actually mean, which rather means pointy ears. Okay. So we're going to talk about these things in more details, by the way, guys, here in a second. But let's just get through the verse. It says, no man with a crippled foot or hand. And it says injured foot or hand, injured, broken, injured. Okay. All the way down, it's broken. Okay. And all the translations, there's nothing unusual. So you can't come before the Lord if you have a broken foot at the moment. Okay. It says, or who is a hunchback or a dwarf. The word dwarf is written in the Bible. Or who has eyes, who
Oh
has
wow.
any eye defect, or who has festering or running sores or damaged testicles. Guys, does this not sound really strange? And secondarily, why disqualify the dwarfs along with the damaged testicle people? Like, man, what's going on there? But now there's the significance to all of this, guys. And we read over this verse and just go, oh, that's weird. But anytime you read something in the Bible and you go, oh, that's weird, you should really pay attention because there's a reason for it. Okay. So a hunchback and a dwarf are in the same categorized thing. So what is a hunchback? And what is a dwarf? Okay. So like when you try to consider what this is talking about, um, what it's describing is it's describing that the Lord, when the angels mated with humans, they didn't just mate with humans, they also mated with animals. And they mated with all kinds of things and created a mix of genetically deprived creatures and all kinds of different things, including little people. Okay, little people were actually the children of Zeus. So you ever see those little cherubs in the thing? Maybe we'll do a little
Mm-hmm.
episode talking about it. Those small people were the children of Zeus. We're gonna do another episode on dwarfism probably altogether. But
Cupid. We could do it around Valentine's Day. We could talk
yeah,
about
we'll
the
dude, let's
cupids.
do it. We'll do it. And so so with the dwarfs, this is referring to a race of angelic offspring that mated with small creatures or small animals and made a race of tiny people. Okay, that's what this is referring to. And the dwarves were angelic, non-human descendants. Even though they had bred back in and maybe they came to serve the Lord, they weren't allowed to come before the Lord in his presence because they were an angelic off-breed spring of perverted creation, technically. Now, it doesn't mean the dwarf people today are that at all. You're basically mostly human at this point. Everyone is. Okay, so the Nephilim bloodlines have like muted into
You're
almost
mostly
everyone.
human. I'm sure they
Yeah,
would like that. Don't worry,
everybody
you're
is.
mostly human.
Everybody's if you got teeth in your mouth that are canines, which is pretty much everybody, you have canine blood in you, which means you have Nephilim blood in you. Surprise! Everybody wants to know where the Nephilim went. They're in you. But anyways, regardless, the dwarfs are people that little people today obviously are descendant humanized versions of this, and it's gotten less and less and less over time. But back in the day, there was photos and skeletons and pictures of people that were perfectly proportioned but small. Do you know what I'm talking about, JT?
Yeah,
Like the
yeah. It's interesting. I did it when we did a trip down to Asheville, North Carolina. We went to that place called Chimney Rock that unfortunately got wrecked during that storm. And we climbed to the top of this place called Chimney Rock. And I've been obsessed when I go out of town to like look up the Native American legends about places. And I thought, oh, this is a weird rock formation. I know there's going to be something about it. Well, there was. And I was thinking, okay, this is definitely going to be giants. It was not giants. It was little people. It was called. They were handsome little fellows, and they had long hair. It's one of these stories that seems way too weird to make up. And they lived in these woods, like you know what I mean, like because the giant stuff you kind of get it, but like
yeah.
handsome little guys, yeah, that's weird. Yeah, they all had long hair
So
too.
strange.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very strange. Well, long. I wonder if it meant long hair or if it meant like hairy because some of them were hairy too.
I have to go back and research that but it was really bizarre. But yeah, it was like I said, it's kind of almost the way like it's too weird to make up. It's It's probably true.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is very unusual. Like, but this is where that came from. Like the dwarves came from mating with small animals. The angels mated with small animals and made animal human squirrel men, basically. Okay. And these squirrel men like continued to breed and then bred back into the human population over and over and over. And then eventually they became like normalish size people. Okay. And so this is where this race of stuff comes from. And this is where J.R. Tolkien actually derives some of his occultic perspectives and knowledge and stuff from. And he talks about these kind of things in his writings, talking about goblins and all kinds of stuff. Now, when it comes to a hunchback, like what is hunchbacks? Hunchbacks are, something we don't see today anymore, but they were very prominent people back in the day. Okay. Today we see conditions of elephantiasis. Okay. Elephantiasis is literally the same thing as hunchbacks syndrome. It's just hunchbacks was an explosion of Nephilim DNA in the person's spine, in their back, like boom, and it would explode and then cause them to hunch because the spinal component, one part of their body, is getting the expression of the Nephilim DNA blowing up in their back, and that's what's happening when people go hunchback. And so, like, that's literally why hunchback is disqualified because it's a Nephilim DNA trait. Okay. And so if you look at anybody with elephantiasis, this is explosion of elephantiasis. This is Nephilim DNA, gigantism, exploding in a person's body. And now it's brought on by a fly, or a mosquito can actually turn on this gene mutation expression. But you can get it from being a child. You can get this kind of disease. And so it like explodes, and it can happen in any part of your body. And so we can type in Indian kid with big hands. Bro, look at this.
What in the world?
Have you this is Nephilim DNA explosion. That's Nephilim explosive DNA happening to this kid.
Gosh.
This bro, look at this. Look at it. Look what it's doing to his hands. Look, there's so many, like, it's just crazy, right? Isn't that insane?
That is wild.
Yeah, this is Nephilim DNA sequencing coming out. Okay, this is Nephilim DNA expression. Look at what this has done to his hands. This guy also has massive hands, or a massive hand. One of his look.
Oh yeah. I think I've seen that guy.
Yeah, look at the Coke can.
It's like Popeye or something.
Yeah, he straight looks like Popeye, dude, for reals. And so, but this is explosionary DNA Nephilim sequencing expressing itself, okay? And so this is the same thing as like having a hunchback. It's the same kind of thing, only it's happening in their spine rather than in their hands or in their bodies or in their legs. Again, Nephilim traits. This is why Leviticus says who is a hunchback or a dwarf, or who has an eye defect, or who has festering or running sores or damaged testicles. Now, why the damaged testicles, guys? Why the damaged testicles? JT, if you mix a horse with a donkey, what do you get?
A mule.
What is the side effect of a mule?
It can't reproduce, right?
Damaged testicles, bro.
Okay. I was wondering if the damaged testicles might be like a eunuch.
Right? Not like this. So the damaged testicles, it could have meant a eunuch, but why would God disqualify somebody that's been damaged or hurt and got their testicles cut off? Like, that seems really kind of ridiculous. It meant because they were hybridized, a side effect of hybridization meant you can't reproduce. Mm-hmm. That's why these races stopped existing. Okay, so here's another animal that can't reproduce. And guess what?
Is that a liger?
It's a liger, and look how big this thing is. And do you know what the crazy part is? Not only can it not reproduce, it's got damaged testicles, but it also exhibits gigantism when you hybridize it. When you mix a lion with a tiger and you get a liger, you get this massive giant cat that cannot reproduce. Isn't that fascinating?
Was it in Napoleon Dynamite? He was saying that was his favorite animal. And
yeah,
he said, what did he say? Did he say something about it having magic properties?
Probably does.
He did. I
For
mean,
sure.
I know that movie's goofy, but
They're saying
that
something
line,
true there.
where did that line come from? Like, from its magical properties.
Yeah. So this is the side effect. So like the liger, by the way, is almost double the size of both of its parents. Okay,
Interesting.
like it is
I had no
massive.
idea. I had no idea it was that big.
Yeah, there. Yeah, and the Tygon doesn't do the gigantism, but the liger does. The liger will become massive in size, and so it's fascinating because it produces this giant creature that's literally the size of a person. Look at this thing,
Oh my
like
gosh!
standing next to this girl. This thing is
Wow.
massive. And it's literally could just like snap your head in like one bite, like one tooth would just go through your whole skull, dude. Like, and so like this thing is look at this dude standing next to this thing, bro.
Oh man, that thing's head is massive.
Dude, it's that, and its side effect is damaged testicles. So now we go back to Leviticus, and it says who has eye defect or who has festering or running sores or damaged testicles. Now the damaged testicles thing, and it says crushed stones. It says damaged testicles, whose stones are broken. Who is a eunuch is one translation because people didn't understand what that actually meant. The crushed testicles, broken testicle, whose stones are broken. It's referring to anybody who can't have children, because if you can't have children, you are more than likely not in alignment with the Lord. Okay, if you can't have children, like you're not in God's perfect genetic alignment. And not saying today that it's different now, but like back then, like if you couldn't have children, it was like you're genetically were cut off from the Lord, because having children was God's promise. It was good. So not having children meant you were genetically deformed or disfigured or mutated. Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that
Uh-huh.
yeah, I mean, to play the other side of it could just be also mean that like some of these verses, in the same way, like the priests had to be a certain way because the animals could not have any defects either, because like they had to be holy.
Mm-hmm.
But I mean,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, that could go along with that effect that obviously all those things would not be holy if they were genetic mistakes, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Genetic anomalous perversions. Now here's where we're going to get into some more genetic anomalous perversions, because we're talking about, remember, we were talking about the elves. So these are cutaneous horns. Have you heard of this word before?
What's
These are
that?
people that cutaneous horns.
Oh gosh.
This is horns that grow on people. But did you know one of the major side effects of cutaneous horns? They always grow on people's ears. Isn't that fascinating?
Oh my
Look at the
gosh.
tip of the ear. This is a little bit disturbing, but look, they grow on the tip of people's ears.
Oh
Look at
wow.
that. Where do you think elves came from, bro?
Oh
Look,
wow.
look at this. Like this is elves growing on the tip of people's ears, bro. Like that's what this is referring to. And so like the
Dude, that one
elves
guy's got
having
they got total elf ears. Where's that one? I saw that one picture. Oh
he,
yeah, that one right in the
dude, look
right,
at that.
well, right down in the middle. Go scroll down a little bit. Well, no, where you on the side of where you had the picture.
Oh, this
Yeah, look at the one right there, the middle one. Is that
yeah,
legit?
this no, it's legit, yeah.
That one is totally an elf ear.
Yeah, he's got an elf ear and a horn growing out of the side of it. And look at the little horn growing here, the little horn growing here, horn growing here. People don't know about this stuff because they don't study enough to like understand the history of it. But this is where this comes from. Like I know this sounds like crazy, but this is literally this is the roots of where this comes from. And in fact, I'm gonna break down something even crazier for you guys here in a second. Cause like, look at this, dude. Look at this stuff. It's gnarly to look at. It's gross. It's grotesque.
Ugh.
But the people back in the day had this. Oh my gosh, it's growing out of that person's face. I don't
Mm.
know if I'm even allowed to show some of this stuff, but oh my gosh, look at this dude's whole ear. Look at that.
Oh my gosh.
Dude, bro has a freaking elf ear. Look at how it like grows out.
Ugh.
Do you see that? That
I
is
see it.
insane. I've never even seen that one before. I've seen a lot of them, but never seen that one. Dude, I gotta save that one. That one's crazy. Whoa, man, that is crazy. Malignant cutaneous horn, a case report. Dude, that is an elf right there, guys. Right there. That's an elf for you. So the defect of these horns growing off people and their foreheads, right? Like this dude growing off of his forehead. Like there's people that have them just like that. Now, I want you to notice something about this. It's gross looking, right? It's grotesque looking. What else does that look like to you? What does
Mm,
this stuff look like? What kind of thing does that look like?
um,
These weird horns.
like a
There's a
goat,
there's a plant that it resembles.
like a mushroom.
Ginger.
Oh, ginger. Okay.
It's ginger root, bro. And so like this is ginger root. And so these cutaneous horns, they would grow on people in all kinds of different ways and in different spots of their body. They would get these horns growing. And these horns looked like ginger root. Okay? And so this is where ginger gets the name from this. From the horns that would grow disfigured and deformed on top of people's bodies. They would see these disfigured horns and ginger was named. In fact, ginger's root word comes from the word horn. The root word of ginger comes from, it literally means horn. And so, and there's another component to the root word of ginger. It comes from the word horn, but it also comes from the word jinn. So jinn or demon is where we get the word ginger, because the jinn were covered in these horns. They were covered, their whole body was covered in them.
Mm-hmm.
But so this is where ginger comes from. So the root word for ginger comes from the term horn, and it means jinn, like demons, ginger. And so what ended up happening with ginger, they named ginger after the jinn people that were covered in horns. And then they attributed ginger to having magical properties, because they knew the people that had horns were like Nephilim descendant magical property beings that were somewhat spiritual and they had special abilities. And so when people started like popularizing ginger, it was like basically they started popularizing it, associating it with the jinn that had these horns all over their body. And so it was like became associated with magical properties, which is why it then became associated with gingerbread, which actually stemmed from this pagan practice that the Romans would do during Saturnalia. They would eat little bread men, and then they started adding ginger to it and witchcraft stuff, because then it became gingerbread men. And then they literally were attributing the ginger to the magical properties of the horned people back in the day. So like this is where, and then this stems further into why they call people redheads gingers today, because redhead people, they knew a lot of the people with horns were also deemed gingers. They were deemed jinn. That's why it's
Mm.
from, they were called jinn, and then they were called gingers. And so
What?
like the red-haired people still took on that name. So that's why the term, if you have red hair, you're a ginger. What does red hair have to do with ginger in any remote sense of any other capacity other
I
than this?
I was trying to think of. I was trying to think what that really would mean, other than what you're saying,
It
because
meant
I was.
exactly. It doesn't. And that's why you get this expression, this comics where, oh, gingers don't have souls, like that little common joke that they had. That was because the jinn didn't have souls, because they were born body and soul in one. And so there was this illusion from the book of Enoch that refers to them not being fully flesh and not being fully spirit, right? And so the theory was that they didn't fully have a full soul. And so that's
Mm.
where that joke stemmed from. And so we literally have this joke in our popular culture, gingers don't have souls, but it came from something much older. The concept of jinn not fully having a complete soul. That's why they're stuck here.
Hmm. Yeah. The redheads in our society are the one
Mm-hmm.
people you're allowed to still make fun of, with that
Yeah,
with impunity. You can just do it while. Yeah, but that always is a weird thing where it's like the yeah, it becomes a ha 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 funny. They have no souls, but yeah, like where does that come from? Other than what you like, if Brian's not incorrect, like where do these kind of mythoses with redheads come from? It's very
yep.
weird, very weird.
Also, I got to mention that the red haired people are actually genetically superior and some aspects of life, rather, because they actually require twice the amount of anesthesia to knock them out, and they are more resilient to spicy foods and pain. And it stems back to the tales of the red-haired giants. Okay, and I know we talked about what is it, the book of Jasher, the book of Yasher.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about the monkeys. We mentioned the monkeys a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and I mentioned that like the orangutan, what was that weird sexualized little demon, the Tokanashi, I believe it is, or
Mm-hmm.
Tokonosh. And that little thing came from a bigger thing, which was a giant orangutan. It was a giant red-haired creature that would kidnap children. Okay, so the red hair thing persisted in the cultures. So people with red hair, creatures with red hair. This was it was like a side effect of the Nephilim hybrid offspring mutating with men and mutating with that. And so like that's why you see things like leprechauns who have red hair,
Yeah, they
right?
do.
The
Mm-hmm.
little leprechaun. You depict him with the red hair, and so you see this red hair. In fact, what is the movie Scrooge and Christmas Carol? It has
Mm.
the Ghost of Christmas Present is a red-haired, red-beard giant that he meets.
Oh yeah, and also like Paul from Understanding Conspiracy and his Nephilims look like clowns. Obviously, clowns
Clowns have red
very
hair.
typically they'll have bright red hair.
Yep. The red hair is an homage to the red haired stuff of old because if you read the old stories about these creatures that would kidnap children, they were hairy and they had red hair in a lot of the stories, or they're giants with red hair. So the red hair has been since muted and bled down into like the genetic anomaly that it is today, which is very minimal. Okay, so if you have red hair today, you're fine. You're not some Nephilim hybrid offspring. I mean, maybe somewhere down the line you have Nephilim blood in you, but so does everybody else.
Didn't
Mm-hmm.
the some of those
Mm-hmm.
old skeletons in South America, the
Mm-hmm.
elongated skulls ones, some of them
Yep,
still had
they
hair
had red hair.
and it was red.
They sure did. They had red hair, and
Mm-hmm.
you can see it. You can actually look it up, and it's still red to this day.
Yeah, weird.
Mm-hmm.
It's really weird. I mean, yeah, it's
Mm-hmm.
too much for not to have something to do with all that.
They were gingers because they were jinn descendants. They were gingers, bro. They were the real jinn. So this is like what Muslims like think the jinn. When Muslims talk about the jinn, they say they are a race of people that lived long ago that no longer live, but their ghosts are still here and they're affecting our world and interfering with stuff. Like they don't really fully know what the jinn are. Like when you talk to a Muslim about the jinn, there's like a lot of misconstrued ideas. They kind of think it's one thing. They kind of think it's this. Dude, jinn are Nephilim. They were the race of the Nephilim that walked the earth until they were killed or killed themselves when Jesus showed up. Okay, that's literally what they were. And
Isn't it?
so,
Okay.
yeah, no, you go.
I was gonna say, isn't it interesting just to go to the movie Aladdin and how the genies are
Mm-hmm.
presented as, good, at least the one in it, but he's trapped, like, so he is imprisoned in this gold little idol, right? That's where his abode is, and you have to rub it. It's almost like and then you have to make wishes, and so you really think about that whole mythology. Even the fact that the genie in the Disney movies is blue, and then you
Mm,
go like you look through the Hindu mythologies and all that stuff. They're often depicted. The demons, the evil gods, are all often depicted as blue. And then
mm-hmm.
you ask this thing for wishes, and obviously it can do basically anything,
Yeah.
right? And
Well,
then
Three Wishes from that movie with Jack Black just came out. The devil showed up and gave him
okay, yeah,
three
well, yeah,
wishes
again,
too.
we have three wishes, right? Correct. And then so even I
Mm-hmm.
was saying like the magic
Mm-hmm.
carpet that could probably be
We got
a
to do a whole episode on
yeah,
this.
that could probably be like a prayer mat. You know what I mean? Is this like an idea of
Uh,
like astral projecting and all this kind of stuff? I think it's interesting in that movie too is that eventually the what's Jafar is the bad character in there,
mm-hmm.
and he wants to become an all powerful genie, and of course with that comes chains. So
Yeah,
like you have
interesting.
all this ability, but you get trapped.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty interesting. Yeah, like that's the whole that's exactly what they're showing you. So yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
Jin, Genie, the Jin, Genie. It's all the same
Gingers.
stuff. It's all the
Yeah, and
same
we're gonna
stuff.
the next episode. Let's talk about this because we're gonna do a breakdown on Aladdin. That's what we're gonna do on the next episode, I think. Okay, just a side note because there's so much to that topic that I want to say, but like, yeah, I gotta hold back. Okay, we're sticking to elves, like, but
Mm.
next episode we're totally breaking this down because this is like when you understand this concept, it's like your mind just is like everything makes sense. You're like, that's why it's that way. That's
Hmm.
why this is like that. That's why this is like that. When you understand the stories of the Nephilim and you understand what the jinn are and you understand these concepts, like all of it starts like puzzle piecing together. And it's like, oh, of course that's what that's from. And it just like lines up in so many amazing ways. One of the things that I mentioned in the last podcast was that I believe that Nephilim, I believe that gorillas are like basically Nephilim with Down syndrome. Basically, like Nephilim that have like some kind of mental like animalistic reversion. Okay, but what's fascinating is in the Book of Jasher. I didn't mention this last time. The Book of Jasher, the people tried to build the Tower of Babel. God cursed them and turned them into apes and elephants. Did I mention this to you, JD? Do you know about this?
Yeah, I've heard that. Hmm.
Yeah, so in the Book of Jasher, it literally says, I think I got, I got a spot right here. Okay, it says Jasher, verse 35, I think it's chapter 9, maybe. It says, and the Lord smote the three divisions that were there, and he punished them according to their works and designs. And those who said, we will ascend to the heavens and serve our gods, became like apes and elephants. Isn't that fascinating?
Well, it's interesting that the
Mm-hmm.
in the Hindu mythologies too, who's the one god that looks has like an elephant nose and everything?
Oh yeah, Ganesh.
Okay, yeah. Hmm.
Yep,
Pretty
they
weird. Pretty
became
weird.
yeah, they became like apes and like elephants. Isn't that fascinating? Yeah, and so you're like, huh. So clearly humans can become like apes to some degree. God actually turned some people into apes, apparently. And then there's elephants, which were the hairy elephants, were woolly mammoths. It almost makes you wonder, were woolly mammoths even these people? Maybe these people were the woolly mammoths, the ones that got turned in from they became like elephants,
Hmm.
um, because they're no longer around. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, the whole thing is bizarre. I
Mm-hmm.
think that but
Mm-hmm.
yeah, obviously, you know what I find interesting, we can maybe hit on the Tolkien stuff just for a second, is
Yeah.
that when you watch the
Mm-hmm.
movie The Lord of the Rings, and I think it's the gosh, is it the second one? I think maybe it's the Two Towers. Is it the hobbits are like you're kind of viewing this place through their eyes, and they haven't been anywhere else, so they haven't seen all the craziest stuff in Middle Earth. But one of the times when they're the most amazed is when they see elephants. I always
Oh
find
yeah,
that
the
interesting.
elephants.
Of all the weird stuff that they've seen on this journey,
Yeah,
it's like elephants. No one's gonna believe this when we get back home.
yeah,
Like what?
the
Why? Like why? Yeah, like why is that the weird? Why is that so weird for them? Something about
the
elephants.
the elephants. I think that were they the elephants.
Oh, and you know what? In back to
Mm-hmm.
Aladdin, remember
Mm-hmm.
he's got a monkey, right?
Yep,
So he's got a monkey, Abu. Is that what his name
Abu.
is?
Yeah, the monkey's Abu.
And then
It's a
when
little
he
elephant.
becomes the
He turns into an
prince,
elephant. Yeah,
he turns the monkey into an elephant.
isn't that fascinating?
Something there.
Hmm. Yep. And so the interesting part about the elephants is the word elephant. So font means to present, and El means the gods. So elephant means to present the gods. And this is why in Indian culture you will see the elephants being ridden by the giants, and they're riding them like they're horses. They look like little horses on them. And so you see them riding these elephants, and literally that's because that's what their job was. They were the burden bearers. Okay, they were literally the burden bearers of the giants, and the giants used them like horses. And so yeah, it's such a fascinating connection. There's so many threads here that connect so many dots that this is gonna hopefully send you guys on some all kinds of wild goose chases that will get your head spinning with all kinds of things. If anybody is I gotta say, anybody that's a J.R. Tolkien fan, if you're a serious J.R. Tolkien fan, message both of us a million times because I want to talk to you specifically because, like, bro, I've been reading through the J.R. Tolkien stuff and it is like intense how much he wrote. And there's
Hmm.
just so much to read. I need somebody that knows this stuff that we can have a conversation with.
Yeah, I agree. It
Write in
was
the
funny.
comments
Yeah,
too. Write
it
in the
was funny.
comments,
I
be like,
agree
"Hey, I
because
messaged you."
yeah, because we
Mm-hmm.
when I we were first going to talk about elves, I was like, oh yeah, let's talk about the Tolkien stuff. And then I realized when I started to go down the rabbit hole, I'm like, this is way too much for me to learn to do a crash course in learning this. It's like this will take a minute to kind of flesh this out. I mean, obviously there's the obvious thing we brought up when we start talking about like the elves in the movie, I think represent angels and things like that, and like how Tolkien has obviously used these things as placeholders for real things, but yeah,
Yeah.
there's way
Would you
too
call
much.
them
I mean, it's
the
like the
Ashkenazi dwarves? What was that you
right,
said?
right. Well, I said I think that the elves represent angels, and I think that yeah, I have a feeling that the dwarves might have represented like the people in that part of the region. You know, like because the temple mount was Mount Moriah,
Mm-hmm.
very similar to Mount. I think it might even be spelled the same way. The mines of Moria is where the dwarves are,
Yeah,
and I joked and I said the dwarves might be Ashkenazi dwarves. I mean,
it's
like you really
hilarious.
think about it. I mean, I'm just saying, like this is obviously from Tolkien's worldview. Is
Wait,
that
don't the dwarves like gold too?
oh,
So
they are
they
obsessed with riches.
with riches and gold.
They're obsessed
Just
with
saying.
riches. They're all about collecting jewels and things
Their
like that.
noses are kind of big and prominent too. I
Well, that's what I'm
think
saying.
there's
If their features, they have certain kinds of features. I I think that's probably what they're. I think that's probably what he's showing people in that.
yeah,
And yeah,
that's kind of what he's illustrating, alluding to. It
and it's
seems.
interesting how that their place is
Mm-hmm.
in the Lord of the Rings. So one of the big emphasis, like, so they got the one dwarf character going with them, and he's saying, "Oh, we should go down to this mine, and this is like a great place." And when they get down there, it's desolate, right? Right? You know, you think about
Yeah,
like
the
yeah,
dragon.
to think about now. Well, I mean, I think there was like what they call it the Balrog, and it's like a
Oh yeah,
and it's a like this
it's a
shadow,
demon.
yeah, the shadow demon thing. But it's interesting, like that, like how we. I mean, right now, I mean, like that place is desolate. You know, it was made
Mm.
desolate in 70 AD. It's not the same thing anymore. So like they went down there, and it was this great place, and now it was
Mm-hmm.
it was the abode of just demons when they got down there, right? Just
Mm-hmm.
the orcs and the goblins,
So
and a giant,
fascinating.
yeah, for real.
And another thing, he was writing. I've been reading through a lot of his stuff lately, trying to like get through his letters. By the way, J.R. Tolkien has letters, and he wrote tons of letters to tons of people. There's a whole book on his letters, responding about the lore of his books. Okay, he's got multiple books, guys, like tons of books, and then he's got like a ton of letters breaking down the details of his stuff. And he one of his lines in his book is perhaps I erred in telling too much. That was one of his lines that I read in his book when I was reading through his letters. And he said it's better left to the individual to search out these matters. It was like something like that he wrote.
Hmm.
And he was like, to search out, like, what are you talking about? I thought you're the one making this up, fool. Like,
Yeah,
and
like
then you
searching out from
realize
where? Yeah, searching out from where? Like not from your own
exactly.
books.
Bro, and he's discussing goblins and how his opinion of goblins might be differ from what he thinks they actually were like, because there's some tales of goblins having soft feet. They have a sensitive spot on their foot. And he was talking about goblins and soft feet or something in one of the letters I was reading about his stuff. And it's just like this is fascinating that he treats it like as though it's real. And so I've heard from some other sources that J.R. Tolkien actually believed his writings about this stuff were from pulling from real historical context that he added to it. And you got to ask yourself, well, what's the real historical context he was alluding to? And there's a very fascinating thing. There's a show apparently, like an anime, I guess, that what is that? The somebody mentioned in the comments. I forget who it was. Sorry for I can't remember your name, but they mentioned that the Angel Studios is putting out an anime.
Oh yeah,
And
I saw that. It was
he's
basically about the Archangel Michael or something like that's like the main character.
and did you see what they said about the they said the angels all have pointed ears. Did
Yeah.
you notice that? Yeah. They wrote
Well,
in the
yeah.
comment.
It's kind of sad, and I
Mm-hmm.
hate to tell people this, but that I know that this is going to perceived as like a really good thing, and it's like, but it's really not because it's like the way that the angels are presented is not.
Mm-hmm.
It's like it's kind of a cool idea, but it's like it verges on idolatry to have like this glorification of these angels in that way. And I think that's, we're not
Mm-hmm.
supposed to be enamored with the angels, even though obviously they are. Like I said, there's an allure to it, but
Mm-hmm.
understanding, that these things are not, like I think there's a reason the Bible does not talk much about the angels, because it's not for us.
Yeah, it's not for us to talk about. It's not to be praised. In fact, every time the angels appear in the Bible, they're like, "Whoa, whoa, don't talk about me. Don't worship me. Don't, yo, hey, stop. Yeah, like I'm just here to deliver a message, bro." Like,
Yeah,
you
because
know.
it's always that, it always comes down to, I mean, the worship of
Mm-hmm.
angels is the worship of
Mm-hmm.
false gods. That's what it is. That's like that. The bad
They
kings
do,
in Israel worship the whole heavenly host. Those were the angels.
Yep, and that's what they're afraid of, walking into that same line of perception as being worshipped as individuals. So the angels of the Lord are very much like, "Yo, don't do that to me. Please don't.
Mm-hmm.
Don't even do that." You're offending them and bringing them into a place of like, wrongness, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
the other interesting part is like there was another dude I just watched. I posted on my story today actually, but this dude had a testimony about going dying out of his body, coming out of his body, seeing his body laying on the ground dead, going to try to open his door to tell his daughter or something. He couldn't. He comes back to his body and he like reaches into his chest to try to like feel his heart, and he's dead, right? He's a total out of body experience. And he said while he was seeing his dead body laying there, he said two creatures came through the walls, and he said they were covered in hair, like short hair. He
Hmm.
said, I call them creatures, but they looked like men. They just had claws, and they were covered in hair, and they had pointed ears. This is what the dude
Point.
says.
Wow.
He said they had pointed ears, and he said they had glowing like eyes. Their eyes were yellow, but there was no pupil in them. And he said a few different things about what they looked like exactly. He said, and they were came with shackles in their hand. They were ready to like, and they were like laughing about the stuff that he did, and they were mocking him, and they were there. They were like, "We're here to take you to hell." And then like he called out to Jesus, and then Jesus at the last minute showed up, and boom, they like ran. They took off, right? And they dissipated. And then Jesus basically said, "Hey, look, I will give you one more chance to go back into your body. But after this, if you do not serve me and you come back to this place because you evoked my name and called out to me, I'm here to save you. But if you can come to heaven now as you are," he said, "and you won't have anything to show for it, and you'll be very shallow, or I can send you back to your body. But if you die again and you're not serving me, I will not come to save you." That's what Jesus told him. Kind of
Hmm.
scary. Kind of a scary message, to be completely honest. Like he's just like, "Okay, you died now once, and like I'll send you back. You don't got a whole lot to show for it. If you want it, you want the chance, but if you're not serving the Lord, I ain't gonna be here to rescue you from these things."
Well, praise God for second chances, right?
Bro, for reals, right? Okay, so there's one more thing I want to mention, and it's in the writings of Josephus. Okay, guys, this book, amazing. Again, I highly recommend everybody get it. There's just a few things I want to mention here that allude to this deformation of giants and small people and all the people that were hybridized. There was deforming going on, guys. That's why you see like elephantiasis and all these weird genetic disease stuff that we see today. We're gonna do a whole episode on the dog people. Also, remind me, dog people, genies, and Jin. These are our next episodes we're going to be talking about, by the way. Dog people, genies, and Jin. Got to remember that. Okay. Maybe I'll write
Okay.
that down. Anyways, let's talk about this real quick. This is kind of a chapter in the Jewish antiquities, book 5, chapter 2. This is Josephus's writings. He's a Roman historian that talked about, for those that don't know, he talked about the times after Jesus died. And he mentioned some stuff. And again, he's a Jew who didn't fully believe in Jesus, but he talks about him. He mentions him by name and who he is. So like
Hmm.
he does 100% mention Jesus, which by the way, some rabbi somewhere I watched him say Josephus doesn't talk about Jesus. Yeah, he does, like
Yeah,
multiple
he
times.
does. Hmm.
Completely. Some
Hmm.
rabbi like trying to lie to people. Like, are you kidding me? Um anyways, Roman historian, Jesus is real. He doesn't believe Jesus is the son of God necessarily, or it doesn't really state what he
No,
actually
I know
believes, but
Josephus was not converted as far as I know. So he
yeah.
was actually
Mm-hmm.
trained to be a rabbi.
Yeah.
So
Mm-hmm.
he actually has like Yeah, that's why he was or not trained to be a rabbi, but a Pharisee. So
Yeah.
he like that's why like his first main writing is
Mm-hmm.
the Antiquity of the Jews, and I think that's where a lot of people get the extra biblical things that they know, the little anecdotes about like either the story of the Tower of Babel and things like that. Josephus fleshes some of these stories out a little more of like combining probably
Mm-hmm.
some of the apocrypha and the text that we do have, and I think that's
Mm.
where a lot of people get their worldview shaped on like the context of these things.
Mm. Yeah, that makes sense. So this is a verse I want to read right here. So chapter 2, book 5, chapter 2, verse 3. There were until then left the race of giants who had bodies so large and countenance so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Terrible. Now, what's interesting is that he mentions to the hearing, which means they had to have been alive because you can't hear bones talk. You know what I mean?
Right,
And what is
definitely.
that? Isn't there like a thing about giants saying fee fi fo fum, crush your bread, or what's
Oh
the thing
yeah,
about
well
their sound?
I smell
Blood
the
of an
blood of an
Englishman.
Englishman, and then yeah,
What was the
they
hearing one? There was something about sound. I forget, some nursery rhyme about the sound of the giants or the terrible sound.
I'm not sure. There was a really wicked movie not too long ago that I saw. It was called I think it was Bone Tomahawk or something like that. It had Kurt Russell in it, and it was about like these deformed giants from
Mm,
it was like it took place like in the western part of the country, like kind of like a wild west thing. And these things, they had these things in their throats, like kind of almost like a little kind of vocal thing, and they used to
mm,
scream, and it was like chilling. It was like
mm.
it was not quite it wasn't a human noise, and I think I can't help but think that's what it was talking about. So these are kind of like you think about that story about like the Lovelock
That's.
caves, and then
Mm-hmm.
the Native Americans burn these giants in these caves. That's what it sounds like because these are cannibalistic giants, and yeah,
Mm.
they make a weird noise when they're about to do something.
That's totally, this is probably where
Yeah.
they get the line because it says,
Mm-hmm.
so let me reread this. There was until this day left a race of giants who had bodies so large and a countenance so entirely different from other men that they were surprising to the sight and terrible to the hearing. The bones of these men are still shown to this very day, and they are unlike those of other men. Okay? Isn't that fascinating? Now, in regards to the L's, I want to point out another chapter here. This is how the Hebrews were delivered from famine with Gibeonites and caused punishment. This is chapter 12 of the Jewish Antiquities. Okay, chapter 12. There's a part where it's talking about all the basically David going around killing all the Philistines and the giants. He went around basically was like, okay, not only did he kill Goliath, but he went around and anybody that bragged that they were a Nephilim descendant, he was like, you're dead. And so like he went around killing people. So there's the son of Araph, one of those sons of a was a son of a giant. He had a spear of a handle that weighed 300 shekels and a breastplate of chain work and a sword. Okay, for he killed many of those that bragged they were the posterity of giants, including a man named Nephan. And another name he went by was El Hanan. Isn't that funny? His name is Nephan or El Hanan. So
Hmm.
Nephilim, Nephan, notice how they put the word Neph in the beginning of it? Egypt, we're going to talk about Egypt as well because I'm going to talk about Nefertiti's and all the Nephilim there. And El Hanan, as in the Elohim. Okay, so and it says he was 6 cubits tall and had on each of his feet hands and one more toe and finger than men naturally have.
Mm.
Isn't that fun? Interesting. The name there though. It's Naphan and El Hanan.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is interesting.
These wild beasts born among ourselves. Now, these creatures, these Nephilim-esque creatures, so, like these sort of, I guess you could say, these hybrid mixed creatures were born out of humanity. They were born out of animals and human mixing with angels and genetic mixes. Now, the last thing I want to mention here is in this Antiquity of the Jews, there's it's called the something disclosure concerning Hades. This is what we believe is Josephus's perspective of heaven. Okay, what he thinks heaven's going to be like when he dies. Okay, and I'm going to read this very fascinating line that he writes at the very end of his perspective. He goes, "There will be no more generations of wild beasts." Again, that word wild beast is not mean animal. It means Nephilim hybrid mixed creature. Okay, there will be no more generations of wild beasts, nor will the substance of the rest of the animals shoot out anymore, for it will not produce men. But
Hmm.
but the number of the righteous will continue and never fail, together with righteous angels and the Spirit of God. Okay, did you not understand that, like, Josephus was writing at a time where he thought in the heavenly realm beasts will no longer produce men? What in the world kind of reality was this dude living in, where he thought beasts, it says, the rest and the substance of the rest of the animals will not shoot out anymore, for it will not produce men? What kind of animals are producing men these days, guys? Is that not a very strangely worded thing? I mean, like, you got to understand, like, what kind of a world did this guy live in where he was assuming that men were coming out of animals at some point? What kind
Mm-hmm.
of things was he looking at? What kind of things was his perspective being drawn from? And there's another verse. It says, trampled upon by these wild beasts, born among ourselves. He talks about the wild beasts being born among ourselves. This is book 4 of the Jewish War, chapter 4. I don't know what verse this is. It's verse 3 actually. Chapter 4, verse 3. So he talks about the wild beast being born among ourselves. And you're like, okay, that's very fascinating when you think about it. Now, here's another very important thing to note. When it comes to the jinn and their genetic hybridization and the mixing of animal DNA and mixture of creatures, it created a lot of disease and sickness. That's what every disease in the world today is a Nephilim genetically hybridized animal mixed thing. Okay. When you mix animals with humans, you get disease. That's what this is. All right. And so there's a very fascinating point that he mentions. Actually, I'm going to read that last, because first I'm going to read what he thought of Egypt. So there's like 3 more verses I got to read.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very, indeed, he has taught us such gentleness. Now, here's an interesting part. With the young ones, but obligated, even though in the enemy's country, to spare and not kill those creatures that labor for mankind, because these things were like slaves and kind of used like slaves in society. Okay, so here's this verse. I got to read this. Now, for the Egyptians, perhaps they are the only nation. This is book 2, against Apion. Okay, so it's his discourse as a criticism, and this is book 2, chapter 12, I believe. It says, "Now for the Egyptians, perhaps they are the only nation that have had this extraordinary privilege to have never served any of those monarchs who subdued Asia and Europe. And this is on account as they pretended that the gods fled into their country and saved themselves by being changed into the shapes of wild beasts. Whereas the Egyptians are the very people that appear to have never had in all past ages had one day of freedom. No, not so much as from their own lords. For I will not reproach them with relating to this manner how the Persians used them. And this is not only once, but many times when they laid their cities waste, demolished their temples, and cut the throats of those animals who they esteemed to be gods." This is talking about the Persians. You see the movie 300 where the Persians pull in those weird monster people? That
Oh
actually
yeah,
happened.
yeah. There's some weird things about the movie 300. Yeah, they have a giant, right? They release
Mm-hmm.
some giant on them, and also, yeah, they had like
A goat man playing the flute.
a Baphomet looking thing, and they had a guy with the kind of like saw hands and stuff. Yeah, weird, really weird stuff.
Bro, that was real. They actually, like, the Persians hired beasts from Egypt to serve in their armies. Like, that's what this is pulling from. That's why he
Hmm.
says that, and that's what he's referencing in this regard. So, like, that, they were beasts. They were not fully human. They were mixed, monstrous looking humanoid, grotesque thing covered in horns, probably, and all kinds of weird stuff. Okay, now there's a very profound statement. Yet if all men had followed in the manner of the Egyptians, the world would have certainly been made desolate as to mankind, but instead had been filled full of the wildest sorts of brute beasts, which because they supposed them to be gods. Egypt was creating and making these brute beast things. That's why you see it all over Egypt. And that will be another episode. We're going to talk about Egypt. And so, yeah, Egypt was creating these things. Now, not only creating, here's another verse, and this is book 2 against Apion, verse 6. It says, since you are yourselves Egyptians, why do you fight it out against one another and have implacable wars about your religion? At this rate, we must not call you all Egyptians, nor indeed in general call you men, because you breed up with great care beasts of a nature quite contrary to that of men. Okay, again, Egypt, talking about brute beasts. It says, here's another one. It says, brute beasts, for so as far as they agree throughout the whole country of Egypt to esteem such animals as gods, calling these brute beasts gods. That's what was happening. And now here is so in Egypt, they were raising up and creating chimeric creatures, hybrid offsprings, dwarves, elves, genetic animal, human mixed things, whatever you want to call it. And the most fascinating part is this verse right here. It says, moreover, Stromfik's law, whoever this is superior to them, both in their souls and bodies. Here it says, who were far superior to them, both in their souls and their bodies. Talking about their descendants, it says their descendants were far superior. Now, here's the Jewish War, book 5, chapter 9, verse 4-ish, somewhere in 4. It says, here's what it says. Who is there that does not know that Egypt was overrun with all sorts of wild beasts and consumed by all sorts of sickness? Did you catch that? It said that Egypt was full of wild beasts and sickness, because when you hybridize animal, angels, and humans, it creates sickness. That's why all the disease and that's why people that have genetic deformities, they're in pain, they're suffering. It's sickness. Like people that are have dwarfism, or little people, like they're in pain a lot of times. I have a friend who's a little person, and he said he's in pain all the time. It's not a wonderful condition. There's like aches and pains because their body wasn't meant to be that way. That body is a deformation of genetic perversions from these things that were created. And we now suffer the pain and suffer the consequences of this stuff as people. And so that's what all sickness in the world comes from. It comes from these angels making and mixing genetic sequencing. So that's why you see these horns growing out of people's faces and these horns on this stuff. Like it's pain as well. It's not just like comfortable to have horns growing off your forehead. I'm sure there's probably all kinds of weird pain coming from that. So anyways, that's all I got to share, I think, today. Do you have anything, any other side notes, JT, you want to throw out there?
No, that's interesting. Yeah, there's truth is stranger than fiction. There's lots of things, and I think they all come from the same place. I mean, that's the whole thing about like the ears, even like the fairies. Like fairies have pointed ears too. So all these magical beings, typically
aliens.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, that often when you see aliens, if they do have ears, they're pointy ears. Martians, right? The Martians had pointy ears.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think it's super interesting. I mean, I don't know. I don't even know, man.
I know this is a crazy subject, and it's probably like, I'll get into the weird genetic stuff. JT, you probably don't like looking at all of it because it's too gross, but like it's very fascinating when you really look into these things and you like start observing like where this all comes from and how it relates to the world today. Like the cleft lip thing, like that's what they're talking about in that regard, in that verse in Leviticus.
That is interesting. Lip. That is interesting. Yeah, some of those things are. Yeah, I think that sometimes we need to really recognize like that we are so far removed from those times. Like, so it really is kind of hard to understand what all it means. And yeah, like the whole thing with like the David's mighty men and them slaying giants and lion men of Moab. that is really weird. I always say that's probably one of the weirdest verses in the whole Bible, and I'd like to know more about it.
Mm.
There's two verses in the Bible that I really like to know a lot more about. Would be the Lion Men of Moab, and I also want to hear more about when Jesus was, when it mentions in Matthew that the tombs of Jerusalem after Jesus was crucified, people just came out of them resurrected or whatever. And it's like, isn't it weird how like those are just one-off verses, and it's like, can we hear a little bit more detail about that stuff?
Yeah, that sounds pretty interesting. I would like to know for sure.
But yeah, there's definitely some stuff in the Old
Mhm.
Testament when it just makes these references to things, and I think that's the whole thing where like you don't get enough, you don't get a lot about giants, you don't get a lot about angels, you don't get a lot about Nephilim in the Bible because in the same way they're not going to glorify chimera and weird creatures. And it's like it's kind of like I imagine the people who are reading this, they're aware of these things, and it's not about that. But it's just like it's almost like it almost makes it seem like it's more common because the way it's just put in there in passing, right?
Yeah, it is very. Yeah, it's very unusual when it's put into passing in the rights in the text, and you're just like, "Hey, whoa, 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 whoa! He just said horseman. What does that mean? He
Yeah,
just
that
said bullman."
people already know these things, so they don't have to go into detail about them.
Yeah, and they were dark things that people were afraid of or didn't want to be around too. So it was like things that it's not like they're walking up to centaurs and going, "What genetic breed are you?" Like, now, how much percent bird and how much percent fish are you? It's just
Yeah.
like these things were creatures that would like kill you and eat you. So they just saw them and they were like, demon. Let's just call it a demon. It's not human. You're a jinn. You're a gentile. You're a demon. Like,
Well,
you're a ginger.
it's interesting again in like the book of Leviticus too when it's talking about atonement, and it's talking about like the sin offering to Azazel. They send one
Mm,
goat out into the wilderness to Azazel, and so Azazel's like literally the scapegoat. He's like the one that I think many people believe they blamed the whole flood on him
mm.
because he was like the one who taught the men all the worst things. And so it's kind of it's just it's sort of an interesting thing that like that's mentioned that so obviously one goat sacrifice, you have, and then you have the sin offering that goes out to basically almost like the devil. I know
Mm.
Azazel is not the devil, but he's kind of like represented as that, as such.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, that's it, guys. Thanks for joining us today. And next topic, we're going to talk about, what did I say? Jinn, dog
Uh,
people,
Dog people,
genies
Jin,
in Egypt.
okay.
Jinn, genies, dog people, Egypt. And then, yeah, we got more cool stuff coming, guys. We'll just stay tuned. We're going to be releasing all the goods and all the details about all the crazy Nephilim stuff, so that way people can be informed about what is going on. And eventually we're going to get to the short season. We're going to definitely have to talk about some of that too.
Oh yeah, it always
So
come back to that. But yeah, I wanted to say this at the very beginning, and if you guys just to end with this is
Mhm.
that a lot of this stuff is just so you guys can be informed. We're not Gnostics. We don't believe there's salvation in this knowledge, and I think that
Yeah.
sometimes people do think that like, oh well, I can't do this now, I can't do that now, I can't do like it. Jesus did all the work on the cross, and we walk in faith today, and like Jesus made all the difference. So these
Mm-hmm.
things are interesting, and I think it is interesting to know where certain things come from, and if these things convict you in any kind of way later, yeah, then obviously then you work that out with God yourself. But yeah, this is more like this is interesting, and obviously this is where our research has went. But yeah, ultimately, still always about Jesus, guys. Always about Jesus.
Always, always, always. And the forgiveness that he brought to
Mm-hmm.
the Gentiles, to
Mm-hmm.
you, to the gingers, to the redheads, to everybody, guys. We're all
Mm-hmm.
we're all Gentiles at
To
this
whoever
point.
believes.
It said preach this gospel to every creature, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Every creature. That includes us. That includes your dog, even. I don't know how that would work, but whatever. Anyways, thanks for watching, guys. Have a great rest of your day, night, whatever, and share this video and follow, please, for more, so I can make more of this stuff, because it'll be fun, and share this video to all kinds of Nephilim friends you got,
Mm-hmm.
because it'll hopefully blow their mind and let them know some cool stuff. All right. Take care, everyone.
God bless.